When a woman goes months without reaching out, the hardest truth to accept is also the most freeing one. This is not confusion and it's not bad timing. Silence that stretches over weeks and then into months is a decision. People make time for what they value, they respond to what matters. When attraction is alive, communication doesn't disappear, it finds a way. So when the silence becomes consistent, it's no longer about mixed signals, it's clarity, even if it doesn't come wrapped in the words you were hoping to hear. Most men struggle at this point because the ego wants explanations. The mind starts creating stories. Maybe she's busy, maybe she's stressed, maybe she's waiting for me to lead, maybe she'll realize what she lost any day now. And those stories feel comforting because they delay pain. But comfort is dangerous here. Comfort keeps you stuck. Reality, on the other hand, gives you power. The reality is that if she wanted to talk to you, she would. If she wanted to see you, she'd make space for it. Silence over time is not accidental, it's intentional. This is where emotional strength begins to matter. Weak men argue with reality. Strong men observe it. They don't chase ghosts or try to revive something that's already been put down. They don't need a dramatic goodbye or a long explanation to move forward. They understand that clarity doesn't always come in conversation. Sometimes it can in the absence of it. And that absence is saying very clearly, right now, you are not my priority. That truth stings, but it also reveals something important about you. How you respond to this silence defines your value more than anything you could say to her. If you break down and start reaching out, double texting, or trying to force a response, you communicate that your sense of worth depends on her attention. You tell her without saying a word that you are afraid to be alone, and fear is never attractive. It confirms to her emotionally that creating distance was the right choice. But when you accept the silence without reacting emotionally, something shifts. You're no longer trying to negotiate attraction. You're no longer seeking validation from someone who has already stepped back. Instead, you're standing in self respect. You're saying, I see your choice, and I respect myself enough not to chase what's walking away. That mindset alone separates men who get stuck from men who rise. Understand this clearly. Clarity is a gift, even when it hurts. Ambiguity keeps you waiting. Clarity allows you to move. Her silence removes false hope and forces you to confront where you truly stand. And once you accept that, you regain control of your life, your emotions, and your direction. You stop living in anticipation of a message that may never come, and you start investing in yourself again. This is not about becoming cold or bitter, it's about becoming grounded. When you stop fighting reality, you stop bleeding energy. You begin to focus on your purpose, your growth, your mission, and ironically, that's when your presence carries the most weight. Whether she ever reaches out again or not becomes irrelevant because you've already won something far more important, your self respect. So don't fear the silence. Listen to it. It's telling you exactly where you stand. And once you accept that truth, you're finally free to move forward like a man who knows his worth. When she goes quiet and disappears for months, what's really happening beneath the surface is a test, one that most men don't even realize they're taking. It's not a test she announces, and it's not always a test she consciously plans, but emotionally she's watching. She's watching to see how you handle uncertainty, distance, and the absence of validation. In that silence, she's measuring your level of self respect. A man who truly values himself doesn't panic when attention is removed. He doesn't collapse emotionally or feel the urge to prove his worth. But for many men, silence triggers fear, fear of loss, fear of not being enough, and that fear shows up in behaviors that quietly destroy attraction. Reaching out just to check in, sending long emotional messages, liking old photos, or trying to reopen conversation with jokes or memories. Each one of those actions communicates the same thing. I need reassurance. From her perspective, this reaction confirms something. It tells her that your emotional center is outside of yourself, that your sense of stability depends on her response. And when a woman feels that kind of emotional pressure, even silently, attraction doesn't grow, it fades. She may not consciously think he's failing a test, but emotionally, she feels less polarity, less mystery, and less desire. Now compare that to a man who stays grounded. He notices the silence, acknowledges it internally, and then continues living his life. He doesn't punish her and he doesn't chase her. He simply matches her energy by respecting the space she's chosen. This response sends a powerful message without words, and that level of emotional independence is rare. This is where self respect becomes magnetic. When you don't react impulsively, you maintain your frame. You don't beg for attention or try to force connection. You allow the silence to exist without letting it define you. That calm confidence lingers in her mind far more than any message ever could. It creates curiosity, it creates contrast, it creates a sense that you are not easily shaken. Many men believe doing nothing means losing. In reality, doing nothing emotionally is often the strongest move. It shows discipline, it shows maturity, it shows that you don't overvalue anyone who chooses to walk away. And when a woman senses that you respect yourself enough to let her go, it changes the way she perceives you, even if she never reaches out again. The irony is that chasing feels active, but it's passive at its core. You're reacting, you're following, you're surrendering your power, walking away with dignity. On the other hand, is active self leadership. You're choosing not to abandon yourself just to hold on to someone else. This moment forces a decision. Either you betray yourself, respect for the chance of attention, or you honor yourself and accept the outcome. Men who choose self respect don't just become more attractive, they become unshakable. They stop negotiating for love and start living from their center. And whether she ever tests the door again or not, the man who passes this test walks away stronger, clearer, and fully in control of his emotional world. When a woman goes months without reaching out, one of the most uncomfortable realizations is that you are no longer her emotional priority. This is difficult for most men to accept because it feels personal, like a judgment on your worth. But attraction doesn't fade because someone is not good enough. It fades because emotional focus shifts. People move toward what excites them, fulfills them, or feels aligned with where they are in life at that moment. When a woman is emotionally invested, communication is effortless. She doesn't have to remind herself to reach out. Curiosity, desire, and connection pull her toward you naturally. So when that communication disappears completely, it's a signal that her emotional energy is being directed somewhere else. That somewhere else could be another man, a new social circle, personal goals, healing, or simply a version of life that no longer includes you. The reason doesn't change the message. You are no longer at the center of her emotional world. Most men resist this truth by trying to compete for attention. They attempt to remind her of what they had, what they shared, or what they could be again. But attention cannot be negotiated. Attraction cannot be argued back into existence. The moment you try to force yourself back into priority status, you actually push yourself further away. Neediness repels because it signals insecurity, and insecurity kills polarity. This is where perspective matters. Being deprioritized does not mean you are disposable. It means the dynamic has shifted. And dynamics shift when emotional polarity weakens. Familiarity replaces mystery. Availability replaces desire. Predictability replaces excitement. Over time, the emotional charge that once pulled her toward you fades, and something else captures her attention. What separates strong men from stuck men is how they respond to this shift. Weak men cling to the past. They live in memories and what ifs. They keep emotional doors open long after the other person has walked through theirs. Strong men accept the present. They don't chase relevance in someone else's life. They reclaim relevance in their own. When you accept that you are no longer the priority, you stop trying to compete with things you cannot control. You stop monitoring her social media, waiting for signs, or reading meaning into silence. That mental energy returns to you, and when it does, growth begins. You start asking better questions, not why doesn't she want me, but what kind of man do I become next? Here's the paradox most men miss. The moment you stop trying to be her priority, you become more valuable. Value is not created by demand, it's created by independence. When you remove your emotional focus from her, you restore balance within yourself. You begin to build a life that doesn't revolve around one person's attention. And that grounded presence is what attraction is built on. If she ever does look back, it won't be because you waited, it will be because you moved on with strength. And if she doesn't, you still win because you refuse to shrink yourself to remain relevant in a space where you were no longer chosen. Accepting that you were no longer the priority isn't defeat, it's clarity. And clarity is the first step toward becoming the kind of man who never loses himself waiting to be chosen. When a woman goes months without reaching out, it often means she believes you'll always be there, not in a romantic, committed way, but in an emotional safety net way. She assumes that no matter how long she disappears, you'll still be available, still open, still waiting. And that assumption quietly destroys attraction because attraction needs uncertainty, not guarantees. Many men unknowingly train women to see them this way. They stay overly available, overly forgiving, and emotionally present even when effort isn't being returned. They respond instantly, keep the conversation alive, and tolerate long gaps without consequence. Over time, this consistency without challenge communicates something dangerous. Access feels permanent, and when access feels permanent, it loses value. This is why scarcity matters. Scarcity is not manipulation, it's reality. Anything that can be accessed at any time stops being appreciated. When she knows you'll answer whenever she feels like reaching out, there's no emotional urgency. There's no risk in taking you for granted. She feels free to explore life, other connections, or her own emotions without worrying about losing you. From her emotional perspective, you become predictable. Safe, yes, but not exciting, and excitement is what fuels attraction. Mystery, uncertainty, and the possibility of loss are what create emotional tension. When those elements disappear, attraction fades, even if affection remains. She may still like you, think highly of you, or feel comfort around you, but desire requires more than comfort. This is where most men make a critical mistake. They interpret her distance as a signal to give more attention, more reassurance, more availability. But giving more when someone is pulling away doesn't restore attraction. It confirms her belief that you'll always be there no matter what. And once she believes that, she stops valuing your presence. The shift happens when you remove access, not with anger, not with ultimatums, simply by respecting her choice to create distance and choosing not to chase. When you stop filling the silence, something changes emotionally. The safety net disappears. She can no longer assume unlimited access to your attention, and that's when curiosity has a chance to recharge. City forces reflection. When your presence is no longer guaranteed, she begins to feel the absence. She may start remembering the emotional energy you brought, the way you made her feel, the stability you represented. That reflection doesn't happen while you're constantly available. It only happens when space is real. This doesn't mean she will always come back, and that's important. The goal is not to create regret in her, it's to restore respect in yourself. When you stop offering unlimited emotional access, you reclaim your value. You signal that your time, energy, and attention are earned, not assumed. Men who understand this don't wait in silence hoping for a return. They use the space to build a life that doesn't revolve around someone else's availability. They focus on their purpose, their mission, their growth. And whether she ever reaches out again or not, the man who removes himself from being taken for granted steps into a higher version of himself. Because the moment you stop being always there, you stop being overlooked, and you start living like a man whose presence actually matters. When a woman goes months without reaching out, what ultimately decides everything is not her silence, but your response to it. This is the turning point where outcomes are locked in, not because of what she does next, but because of what you choose to do while nothing is happening. Your reaction during this period quietly determines whether curiosity ever replaces indifference or whether the door closes for good. Most men react emotionally. They interpret silence as a challenge they need to overcome instead of information they need to accept. So they reach out impulsively. They send messages that sound casual on the surface but carry emotional weight underneath. They ask questions they already know the answer to, hoping for reassurance. And in doing so, they communicate desperation rather than strength. From her emotional perspective, chasing confirms her decision. It validates the distance. It tells her she made the right call by stepping back, because now she sees that your emotional stability depends on her response. Attraction cannot grow under pressure. When she feels responsible for your emotional state, desire disappears. What might have been curiosity becomes certainty, and certainty kills attraction. But when you respond with restraint, something very different happens. You don't react out of fear. You don't try to reclaim control through words. You allow the silence to exist without chasing it away. This is not passive, it's disciplined. It takes far more strength to do nothing than to react impulsively. And that strength communicates value at a deep emotional level. Walking away silently without announcements or dramatic exits preserves your dignity. It keeps your emotional center intact. You're not trying to punish her or teach her a lesson, you're simply choosing yourself. And that choice is felt even if it's never discussed. It creates contrast between who you were when you were available and who you are now that access is gone. During this period, your focus shifts inward. Instead of waiting for her to change her mind, You change your life, you invest in your body, your mission, your skills, and your social world. You rebuild confidence not through validation, but through progress. And that internal shift rewires how you carry yourself. Your energy changes, your presence deepens. If she ever does reach out again, it will not be because you convinced her with words. It will be because absence allowed reflection, and reflection created curiosity. She'll sense that you're no longer in the same emotional position. You're calmer, more grounded, less available.
Mm.
And that shift alone can reopen attraction because attraction thrives on polarity and strength. And if she never reaches out, you still win because the version of you that emerges from this period is not dependent on her return. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's attention. You've already reclaimed your power. You've already grown past the need to chase what walked away. This is why your reaction matters more than her silence. Silence is neutral. Your response gives it meaning. You can turn it into a lesson in self, betrayal, or a moment of self mastery. And the man who chooses self mastery never truly loses, no matter how the story ends. When a woman goes months without reaching out, it can feel like rejection, abandonment, or failure. But at a deeper level, that silence is an invitation, one that most men either ignore or misunderstand. It's not an invitation to wait, to hope, or overanalyze her behavior. It's an invitation to evolve. Life has created space, and what you do with that space determines the man you become next. Silence removes distraction. When her messages stop, the emotional noise fades, and you're left with yourself. For many men, this is uncomfortable because it exposes areas of life that were neglected while emotional energy was focused elsewhere. Goals get postponed. Health slips. Purpose becomes vague. Her absence forces you to confront what you've been avoiding, and that confrontation, while painful, is powerful. This is where growth begins. Instead of asking when she'll come back, strong men ask what needs to change. They channel the emotional energy that once went outward into discipline. They train their bodies, sharpen their minds, and refine their direction. They stop living reactively and start living intentionally. Pain becomes fuel instead of poison. And most men waste this phase by staying emotionally tied to the past. They replay conversations, imagine reunions, and measure their progress by whether she reaches out. That mindset keeps them stuck. Growth only happens when you let go of outcomes you can't control. The moment you stop waiting for validation is the moment you start building real confidence. As you level up, something subtle happens. Your identity shifts. You're no longer the man who was left. You're the man who used the setback to upgrade his life. That internal transformation changes how you speak, how you move, and how you show up in the world. Confidence becomes quiet. Presence becomes solid. You're no longer seeking approval. You're creating direction. This is why men who rise during silence don't fear loss. They understand that nothing external defines them. Whether she ever notices the change is irrelevant. The growth is for you. And paradoxically, that's what makes it attractive. Women are drawn to men who are grounded in purpose, not men who orbit around someone else's attention. If she does return, she'll feel the difference immediately. You won't be trying to impress her. You won't be emotionally reactive. You'll be centered, composed, and selective. And that dynamic alone rewrites the power balance. But if she doesn't return, you're still ahead. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed her presence to feel complete. This phase separates men from boys. Boys wait for things to happen to them. Men create momentum regardless of circumstances. Silence becomes a forge. Pressure becomes refinement. What felt like an ending reveals itself as a beginning. So don't see her absence as loss. See it as space to become stronger, sharper, and more self directed than you've ever been. Because when you rise during silence, you never go back to chasing. You become the man others reach out to.